Eva. How are you, Eve?
I'm great, Ranjana. Great to see you.
Good
How
to
are
see
you?
you, and thank you for joining. I'm such an interesting.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Yeah.
Good. We're looking forward to hear experts like you, and of course Anne, who's always been great support and been part of what we do a lot of times. And where is Shireen?
Shireen was here. She's checked on everything and she'll be back, I think so.
Okay. So Anne, are you hearing all the sounds next door?
You mean in Russia?
Yes.
That next door? No, really glad that we're not hearing. That's pretty far away, actually. We have Latvia to the south, and below that Lithuania, and below that Belarus. And that's very, very close to it all. We hear aircraft going over, military aircraft very high over. I think that's probably NATO, we hope. So there's a lot of support, beautiful, beautiful support for refugees, and a great deal of unity being expressed that's very, very inspiring, that I'd love to see more of in my own country. But I feel that our president's doing a great job with multilateral diplomacy, and that we're very lucky that we're in that place now and not acting as if we somehow can do anything unilaterally. So I guess there are some good things coming out of this, but it needs to end.
But I hope you all understand India's position, because we are between teeth, we are the tongue between teeth.
Yeah. We're glad you're there.
That's why this whole non-alignment.
South Africa. Yeah, South Africa also. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're in the same unfortunate boat.
Yes. And also, we have traditionally been following this whole policy of non-alignment, where we don't go with the major global forces because India cannot afford to do it at this stage. So that's the reason why what we did in Security Council and also General Assembly, to just abstain. I hope global community is not very upset about that stand India has taken, because majority of the global forces are together, and 141 countries. They are, but anyway, let's see. I think the war must end, and we all women should get together and push for peace talks to start instead of arming. Okay, I can see Jyoti coming up. We are right on time, Jyoti.
Yes.
There's Shireen.
Time to begin. So yeah, wonderful to see all of you here. Shireen has joined, and we're just hoping that Professor Sonia joins us soon. But in the interest of time, I think we should begin. And I'm going to start right away. So I would like to say that Center for Social Research India, I'll start with a short introduction, although I know most of you know what CSR is, but I'll start with that introduction. The Center for Social Research India is an organization working for empowerment of women and children for the past 4 decades. CSR is widely considered a think tank for gender policies and law. Team CSR has zealously participated in the UN Women's CSW for the past 20 years. We are always honored to be able to utilize this enormous platform. Now, with the advent of digital technologies, we have a brilliant chance of reducing the gender gap that has hindered true progress of our society. Digital spaces have transformed into the new public sphere, where geography, age, sexual identity, gender, all intersectional issues that hinder the advancement of communities have an opportunity to reinvent themselves. As what matters most in the digital world is capability, accountability, achievement, caliber, and talent. However, unfortunately, in reality, vulnerable groups are still playing catch up. Children and youth especially women, are losing out on the opportunities and possibilities that the online world can provide. Therefore, we at the Center for Social Research have dedicated the last decade to make sure this is not the case, and have undertaken multiple initiatives involving all stakeholders. And we are here today to globally amplify our efforts toward an inclusive, safe, and secure space for women and children. Today, it is my privilege to welcome our esteemed panelists who have been working towards enabling and empowering women and children in the digital world. We have a few slides that we would like to share now. Yeah, I hope you can all see that clearly on your screens. CSR is a United Nations Economic and Social Council member, and we hold our event every year at UNCSW. This year, our discussion will revolve around inclusive, safe, and secure digital spaces for women and children. And we would like to take this opportunity to introduce the work we do in this field. CSR, under its online safety and security wing, has implemented numerous projects successfully in the past decade. We have interacted with over 500,000 youth and children directly in our efforts to educate and train them in best practices to stay safe online. Along with this, we have worked with stakeholders like parents, teachers, caregivers, and guardians, and built their capacities. In our efforts, we have successfully worked in 27 states across the country and roped in thousands of schools and colleges and educational organizations in over 700 plus workshops and sessions. India is a country of more than 100 different languages. Hence, in our efforts to reach children, our modules and workshops are simultaneously being carried out in multiple regional languages. One of our recent programs is We Think Digital in partnership with Meta, where we work to educate school children on online safety and digital well-being. Another recent program in association with Twitter India has gained momentum with the youth, where we have worked to generate awareness among young people, especially women, to know their civic rights of participation in the digital space. And we work closely with government policymakers to advocate for better formulation and implementation of online safety policies with women and children. Our one-of-its-kind dynamic and evolving toolkit in India has enabled ease of understanding and access to solutions by individuals and institutions alike. CSR has developed an evidence-based advocacy document for government, internet platforms, CSOs, among other stakeholders. Some of the suggestions in that are, for the government, enhancing access and affordability of digital technologies, progressive educational curriculums to foster skilling, capacity building of law enforcement agencies, enacting robust data protection framework, and promoting strong encryption. For internet platforms/intermediaries, furthering digital literacy and capacity building, safety by design and enhancing platform policies, investment in research and development of privacy respecting tools for safe digital spaces. And for CSOs, raising awareness on digital rights and appropriate online behavior, engagement with government and the intermediaries to provide constructive feedback, and focus on evidence-based research to enable women and youth-centric safety policies. Thank you for listening to this, and moving right on, let's meet our speakers for today. Some of the most admirable women and with tremendous contribution to safety and security of women and children. Amongst our speakers are Professor Sonia Livingstone, who is a professor in the Department of Media and Communications at London School of Economics. Her area of expertise is children's digital experience and their rights. She serves on the executive board of UK's Council for Child Internet Safety. Currently, she directs the Digital Futures Commission with Five Rights Foundation and Global Kids Online Project with UNICEF. We also have with us Ms. Ngo Collier. She is the founder and executive director of Net Safety Collaborative, a non-profit organization. Ms. Anne serves on the trust and safety advisories of Facebook, Twitter, Yubo, and YouTube. and also the board of directors of the National Association for Media Literacy Education in the US, and the international advisories of the Young and Resilient Research Center at Western Sydney University and Project Rocket in Melbourne. We have with us Ms. Eve Thompson. Ms. Eve is the founder, director of fempo.net and Vocal, working on transforming African women's position through political and social empowerment. Ms. Thompson has held several country director posts in promoting democracy, good governance, conflict mitigation, and advancement in the society of women, youth, and other historically marginalized groups in Africa. We have with us Ms. Shireen Vakil, Head of Safety Policy Asia Pacific at Meta, a passionate advocate for children and women's rights. Ms. Shireen spent 20 years in the development sector, primarily with Save the Children as Director of Advocacy and Policy. With expertise in child protection, education, gender, and justice prior to Meta, Shireen was Head of Policy and Advocacy at Tata Trust, India's largest philanthropic organization. Shireen has appeared and written on a spectrum of child rights and gender issues in national and international media. And finally, Dr. Ranjana Kumari, Director, CSR. Dr. Ranjana Kumari is an icon for the empowerment of girls and women in India. She is a prominent activist who has served on many government committees and commissions as an advisor, including National Commission for Women, Ministry of WCD, among many others. Dr. Ranjana is a member of the State Safety Advisory International Board of Meta and the Trust and Safety Council of Twitter, and a member of the Oversight Board formed for OTT platforms. Thank you, everyone. Can you please remove participant Peter file, team? Thanks.
Yeah.
Do we have, Sonia Livingstone, professor is here. Thanks for joining us, Sonia. Welcome to our event. Glad you could take time out for this important global discussion. Hi.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Yes, I am here. Yes. Okay. Shall I kick off?
Yes, driving straight into this, Sonia, we would like you to please let us know your perspective on the issue of safe and inclusive digital spaces for women. And we know your main area of focus is and expertise is children's rights in the digital age.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I'll focus on girls more than women, if I may, because my focus is on children. But of course, many of the issues are overlapping. And actually, I love the way that this forum brings girls and women together, partly because often I speak in fora that are concerned with children in particular, and it can often feel quite a kind of small and specialized space in which people who think about children talk to each other, but not in a kind of wider world of the population or of people. So I value being able to speak to you today. And I also value speaking today in this very international group, because at least in Britain, children are often thought of as such a small proportion of the population, so few in number, that they almost don't matter. They count as a kind of a special case on which those of us who talk about children are often seen as somehow making some special pleading for children's rights in a digital world, as if everyone else in that digital world had no interest in children, had never been a child, and had no concern for the or didn't live with children, as if children are some bizarre minority. So of course they are important in many ways. Not least, we were all children. Many of us have children, live with children, know children, and care about the nature of a world in which children have their rights respected and are safe. I confess that I struggle a little more in thinking about questions of gender, and I will share my thoughts a little with you in the hope that others here will illuminate my thinking, and this will be part of a conversation. So one of the things I do, I speak as a researcher, and I speak from at LSE. I work on many projects, one of which is with UNICEF Office of Research at Innocenti, and we together lead the Global Kids Online project, which seeks to have international reach, and quite recently published its report on Gujarat, so on a significant part of India. I don't know if my colleagues from that report are here today. But very often what we find when we study children's online risks and opportunities in many parts of the world is that the theme and concern with gender is quite is less prominent than we expect it to be, and quite nuanced. So certainly we do find that questions of protection, which are crucial for children's free expression and participation online, we often find those questions and problems of protection affect girls more, but not always. And it's a puzzle to me whether society overlooks the difficulties and struggles that boys experience online, or whether there are gender biases in reporting that somehow make it less evident that let's say boys also find the internet problematic in so many ways that both boys and girls tell us about a whole range of problems that they experience online, and we tend to ask them about unwanted or inappropriate or problematic exposure to sexual content, to violent content, self-harm, and suicide content, hate. And part of the issue, I think, is that both boys and girls experience this personally. And also it's that they all see it. So yes, girls are a really crucial issue, but I just make this plea that when we think about children, there are many ways in which boys' concerns go unnoticed or under recognized. The second kind of difficulty I have with questions of gender is that we always try to balance what are the risks and what are the opportunities, what are the ways in which the digital world challenges children's lives, and what are the ways in which it enables and empowers. And when it comes to the opportunities, the positive side of the digital world, we do see gender differences. So to put it very simply, girls tend to be more strong advocates of social media, and boys are more into gaming. This is the sort of the classic difference. But it doesn't seem like an inequality. It seems like a choice, and it's quite hard to argue that this is a matter of inequalities, though any narrowing of children's opportunities raises the question about inequalities. And there is no doubt in my mind that girls often find themselves unwelcome or attacked in gaming spaces, and so their kind of ability to enjoy those spaces as an opportunity is undermined, and perhaps that's an example of how a digital space offers young people both opportunities and risks simultaneously. And sometimes young people, as we know, are growing, they are experimental, they are a bit risk-taking, and sometimes they explore exactly those kinds of boundaries between the risks and the opportunities. One of the other areas where we have in the Global Kids Online work seen the question of gender very strongly is in the judgments of the society that shape and often constrain the way in which girls especially enjoy the internet, though some of these things apply to boys as well. But we can systematically see girls are much more closely monitored, much more closely supervised, more restrictively supervised, rather than the kind of parental supervision that enables and empowers. So girls are kind of watched and more constrained and more harshly judged when something goes wrong. And over and again, when children encounter or when girls encounter difficulties online, we, society, are always advising them, tell somebody, share the problem, get help from somebody. But if girls receive this very harsh judgment or this more restrictive or more punitive response, this really undermines their ability to seek help. And so in that sense, girls are perhaps more on their own. And what they often say in qualitative work is how much they rely on their peer group. And this really reminds me of the importance of thinking about children plural, girls plural, the kind of the collective level of the digital experience as well as the individual level. It's not just a matter of what one girl experiences, or it's also what she sees, her impression of the world around her, a digital world in which whether it affects her or no, people are often harshly judgmental, hostile to each other, and girls support each other in this. So perhaps they kind of travel in packs a little bit as a sort of a survival strategy when coping with the digital. And they often tell me that there is a double communication going. So they are in the gaming world or in the social media world with everyone else, but on they're also messaging with their few friends. You know, what do you think of this? And shall I try this? And this is a problem. What do you think? So there's a kind of an inner circle, and then there's the wider. So I do think that in many cultures, once children have gained access to the internet, gender differences do require us to think in a nuanced way to recognize the relation between the risks and opportunities and the social structures of support or lack of support that surround girls, both online and offline. I realise that one really crucial point that I haven't mentioned so far is the importance of access in the first place. So the Global Kids Online research is a study of children online. We kind of begin with the group of children who are online, and we trace their pathways through the digital experience for better and for worse. But that first chance to get online is probably where the greatest gender inequalities lie. And that applies both to gaining, to the whole complexities of the digital divide, gaining access to devices, to connectivity, to spaces in which to go online with relative lack of interruption and privacy, the resources to, as I've already said, to access the internet in ways that are not too closely supervised, that allow freedom and agency to the child, and that don't involve problematic trades. You know, I'll give you access if you will do this for me, or you can only have access in the cyber cafe where you have to accept a measure of harassment. You know, there are lots of very problematic and damaging trades that girls find themselves making to gain access. So you know, as we kind of follow the pathway, and really it's a circuit, but the pathway that includes questions of access, kind of skills and knowledge, opportunities, risks, and social support. All of those things are kind of potentially mutually reinforcing, potentially enhancing, but also potentially undermining. And so the subtle ways in which girls do lose out in a digital world are require requires some analysis, because the statistics don't always show the most bald kinds of inequalities. I was introduced as saying something about children's rights, and if I can kind of now take what I've said about the kind of the empirical findings and add a children's rights gloss, you'll see that I'm very kind of concerned with the evidence base that informs practice and informs policy. There are so many problems with the evidence base around the world that, you know, I really do call on any researchers listening to kind of get involved in helping to collaborate and improve the quality of the evidence base. We don't really yet have a carefully disaggregated evidence base that recognises the intersectional forms of inequality that affect girls' lives. So yes, most research will look at girls versus boys, but not by ethnicity or caste or class or disability and capacity or urban, rural, or, you know, there are so many forms of inequality, and it is likely the case that girls are kind of multiply disadvantaged if viewed through that intersectional lens, but we generally don't have the evidence. Sometimes I almost think it's a good thing our policymakers are not very evidence-based, because the evidence is not all we would wish. But I, of course, in a happier world, there would be better evidence and better policymaking. So a child rights approach always emphasizes the importance of evidence, and evidence disaggregated by all the possible forms of discrimination that matter for girls, as we're discussing today. And the child rights approach always advocates the inclusion of children's voices. There's so much I could say about how children's voices are not attended to in relation to girls' opportunities in a digital world. Girls are perhaps the last people who are listened to when policymakers and practitioners are preparing their interventions. I see in the world of kind of multi-stakeholder practice some confusion between children's voices and research on children. Even researchers themselves would always distinguish research on children and research with children, and then I would distinguish again research with children, which is important and an improvement on research on children, from children's voice, as in Article 12 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is not just a matter of hearing children's voices, but ensuring that these voices are consequential, that their voices are acted upon. And sometimes I think that the kind of the one and the best piece of advice for any practitioner and policymaker is to listen to children. I have a list as long as your arm of the reasons why in any particular instance no one has actually listened to children, especially to girls. Oh yes, I know it's a good idea, but actually it's expensive. Or I know it's a good idea, but we did this research in a bit of a rush. Or I know I should have done it, but children are so hard to find. Where do you find them? Oh, I know I ought to listen to children, but the research ethics are just too much bureaucracy, and I don't want to have to bother to talk to them ethically. Children don't really understand the digital world, so what's the point of listening to their voices? Or the worst that I hear is if we listen to children's voices in planning the digital world, then we would kind of turn the whole thing into a childish space. And it wouldn't anymore be a digital world for adults who want to do all kinds of, who want to be free, not as if children themselves don't wish to be. So there are just so many reasons why even those who seem to advocate child rights and seem to be in tune with it, in practice skip that really crucial step. And it's crucial not only because it's written in the Convention on the Rights of the Child that children would be listened to on matters that affect them, but because actually when you consult them, they have very interesting and productive and thoughtful things to say, which are often outside our adult imagination. And this was very evident when we were working with the Committee on the Rights of the Child to produce General Comment 25. And my colleague Amanda Third led a consultation of children around the world in very many countries, primarily in the global south. And children were she's very good at creating the context within which children are directly challenging of adult assumptions. We don't even see our values about what is a worthy way, a good way of spending time online, or what are the right things that children should be doing online, or what are the things they should be learning before they can go online. And certainly we are very poor at knowing what it is children would find helpful when something goes wrong, and when they want protection and they need protection, or when they meet a problem. A classic one I heard the other day, I'm working with a group who are trying to put in some support for mental health support for young people online. And they thought that they would respond to a question, a problem children had within 24 hours. And they thought this is a fast response. They will respond within 24 hours. If you talk to children, they will be shocked if you take more than half an hour. Actually, they would like a response in 3 minutes, please. This is when they're online in the session. And the idea that you would have to wait 24 hours before an adult heard your call was just... But if I take that back to the adults designing services, they are so proud of themselves for responding in 24 hours. They cannot imagine 3 minutes. So I think, yeah, there are just lots and lots of little ways, but they add up. I should probably wind up soon. I'm looking to see if my host wants to wave a hand at me to say I should
Yes,
stop.
Hi. But I would like to just say, thank you for being so candid with letting us know the reasons why. We've all experienced those, but coming out of your mouth, they do hold a lot of weight. Definitely evidence-based research. And I would say that I have seen you call people out on social media as well, asking them about the evidence on the research and the articles being shared. And I really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Sonia. Thank you for giving such candid and well thought of inputs. We have Shireen with us. Hi, Shireen. Thank you for joining us today. And again, a very happy Navroz. As the head of safety policy at Meta, we would benefit greatly by hearing your perspective on the issue. Your slides are going to go up now. Apurva?
Okay, thank you very much, Jyoti, and thanks for inviting me here, and thanks to CSR for hosting this. And it was very interesting to hear from Professor Livingstone just before. And of course, I think there are lots of issues for children, and very importantly, listening to their voices, especially when we look at things that affect them. And in our part, I head safety policy for Meta for the Asia Pacific region. And in our part of the world, we have a very young population. So it is something that is topmost in our mind. And of course, gender issues and the gender divide, especially in South Asia, is huge when it comes to women and girls. And even when they I think they're actively sort of discouraged from being online and expressing themselves in general. So this is a very important issue for us, and important that they feel safe in order to be online. So I'm just going to go through very quickly our overall approach to safety, and specifically when it comes to groups such as children and women. So if we just go to the next slide, please. So overall, our mission at Meta, which most people still know as Facebook, is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. And we saw that, especially in times of COVID, how much people use our platform to connect and build communities, and especially women really took to the internet. And we know also how important it is for them to feel safe in order to be able to build these groups and communities. So if we go next. So this is an issue that we take is a big priority for us, and we have about 40,000 people across the world working on safety and security from very diverse backgrounds. And we spent last year about 5 billion on safety and security. And we know that this is something that we can never do enough, and we need to do more and more, especially as technology evolves so fast, and as a result, online behaviors change constantly. So we need to constantly be ahead of the challenge. So if we go to the next slide. And so we take a kind of 5-pronged approach to safety, starting with partnerships, which is really important to us. So while we have a lot of people working on safety, we know that we need the expertise of people such as my other panel members to consult with in order to develop our policies, tools, and resources. So we have about 800 plus partners across the world, and a safety advisory board, of which, of course, CSR and Dr. Kumari is a member. And policies are basically what we refer to as our community standards, which kind of outline what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Several tools, including technology, which proactively detects harmful content, as well as behaviors, as well as user-facing tools to give people more control over their interactions, and resources that we develop with partners to help people in a variety of different ways. And importantly, feedback, so that we can keep improving and refining and making sure that the policies and the tools that we develop are relevant and useful. We go next. So our policies are what we call our community standards, and we are a global platform. We have close to 3 billion people using them across the world, and they need to be equally relevant in Pakistan and India as in the US, UK, Argentina. So we try to find that balance, be as inclusive as possible, consulting with our different partners, but also keep the balance of enabling people to express themselves while promoting a welcoming and safe environment for everyone. So this goes with our teen users as well, to make sure that they do have some agency, but are also safe, and try and make sure that there is that balance that is struck correctly across cultures. If we go to the next slide. So certain things that we do not allow in terms of safety. So child safety, we have a zero tolerance towards child sexual exploitation, and even in issues such as child nudity, for instance, even if you're posting benign pictures, parents themselves, grandparents, it would come down. So because we want to make sure that it's not kind of misused. And then we have several other policies around bullying and harassment and adult sexual exploitation, etc. So if we go next, one of the policies I just want to touch upon is the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, because this is something that we have been working on over the last few years. And we know how devastating it is for people when their intimate images are shared without their permission. So this is what people often refer to as revenge porn. So we remove any such images, as well as threats to share those images. And over the last 5 years, we have been piloting an initiative in about 20 countries across the world to stop the sharing of non-consensual intimate images, which we refer to as NCII. And if we go to the next slide, and then a couple of months ago, we developed, based on those findings, we developed a global initiative called stopncii.org, along with UK revenge porn, which is available to anybody to use across the world. And we have currently about 50 partners across the world. And as I said, it's just initiated a couple of months ago. Yeah, sure, go to the next slide. And here, what it is, it's before they even appear on our platform. So it is to enable people, if they are worried about an image that they feel might get shared, they can go on to www.stopncii.org, and they will be asked a series of questions, including their age, because this is only available to those above 18 and not for minors. And then they can put in those images, choose the images that they feel they're worried about might get shared, but they don't need to share it. A hash is created on your own device, so on your mobile or on your computer, and it never leaves your device. So a hash or a digital footprint is created, and then stopncii.org will share this hash with the participating tech companies, who would then, if it ever comes up, it would be removed, recognized by the machines, and not allowed to go on the platforms. So this is something that has been developed for industry as a whole. At the moment, it's Facebook and Instagram that are participating, but we hope that other industry members will also join, and it is open for them to join, so that if a woman or indeed a man has an image, they don't need to share it with 5 different companies. They can just have this hash created by stopncii.org, and then they would share it with whoever is participating, whichever of those companies. We go to the next slide. So next slide, so I am conscious of time. I know we're severely out of time. If we go to the next slide. So we have a host of resources, just to end, several resources for children, for young people, for educators, parents, as well as, if we go to the next slide, a women's safety center that we have created, which will bring together all the various resources that we have for women on our platform. And I think that's the next slide, but there seems to be some kind of, yeah. So this is a women's safety hub, which has a series of resources, including a training that you can watch that would take you through all the various tools that you have to help your experience and keep yourself safe. Okay, and I think we can end there. Thank you.
Thanks, Shireen. Very, very useful information. And I want to say NCI especially, we really, really believe in the initiative. And I really hope other organizations also, join hands, as you said. So a user doesn't have to report it to 5 different platforms, and it can happen it's painful enough to report, but if it can happen at a single portal, it's amazing. Thanks. Thank you so much, Shireen.
Thanks, Logan.
So coming to you, Eve. Hi, Eve Thompson. With your work at FEMPO to support women to enter and thrive in the political space in Africa, please tell us your perspective on the role of inclusive and safe digital spaces. We believe you have a few slides you would like to share today.
I do.
Just a moment.
I do. Thank you.
They're just going up now. Yep.
Great, super, thank you so much. And really, thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this very important discussion. I bring a very practical perspective as someone, an NGO practitioner who has operated mostly in the African context. And that's what I know best. And so I bring that perspective. So if we can go to the first slide, please. I'm going to try to stick to 5 minutes because I know the time is very short. So as Jyoti just said, I founded an organization called FEMPO. If you look online right now, it is not there because it was developed on the basis of, or as a model, or to model after an organization called Emily's List, which is based in the US. And it was founded in order to provide a voice and a platform to pro-choice women in the United States, pro-choice candidates who were running for political office and to promote them, particularly in the context of social media. And so I decided I wanted to do the same thing for women in Africa. And I happened to be in DRC, the Congo at the time. And so I actually started what I guess I can call a pilot project called FEMPO. And what you're seeing on the right side of your screen is what that looked like. Basically, what we tried to do is kind of create a platform that looked very much like Emily's List for women in Congo who were running for political office, both at provincial and national level. And so the intent of this project was to build the capacity of African women to promote themselves in the political space. Some of them at the time that we started to train them were people who didn't even own a smartphone. They had dumb phones. And so they weren't able to do what we were trying to get them to do in order to, because many women who operate in the political space in Africa, and I'm sure it's the same in other places as well, they're within political parties, but often they don't enjoy the lion's share of the resources in terms of promoting themselves. And so they're really left to fend for themselves. And so this, we thought, could fill a gap with respect to that. But then we suddenly discovered, and this is what happens when very well-intentioned people try to give a voice to political actors or other historically marginalized groups, there are some downsides. And what we found was, of course, access to the grassroots was problematic because not everybody who's operating at that level has a smartphone or a way to access the information in social media. But also, and this comes to what we're talking about today, we were completely, I would say almost blindsided to come to understand that women in particular were disproportionately in this very patriarchal context called Africa, were subject to attacks, and particularly with the advent of social media. So next slide, please. So, and I think just at the time we were recognizing that leaders of the social media platforms were also coming to terms with this reality. And so I have in the next 3 slides, just quotes from social media leaders. So we'll start with this one. We suck at dealing with abuse and trolls on the platform, and we've sucked at it for years. We lose core user after core user by not addressing simple trolling issues that they face every day. I'm frankly ashamed of how poorly we've dealt with this issue during my tenure as CEO. It's absurd, there's no excuse for it. That was back in 2015, coming from Dick Costolo, the former CEO of Twitter. Next slide. In the same year, the female general counsel of Twitter in 2015 said freedom of expression means little as our underlying philosophy if we continue to allow voices to be silenced because they are afraid to speak up. And I just have that 70-40 because it's just such a stark example or a statistic that portrays the direness of this situation. So 70% of women journalists who were polled by Amnesty International said that they were the target of abuse. But what is even more telling or more concerning is that 40% of those women who said that they were targets of abuse reported that they stopped doing what they were doing. They stopped reporting as a result of the abuse. And this is so telling in terms of how chilling this activity of abuse what kind of a chilling environment it can create. So next slide, please. So coming to 2018, this gives an indication of the evolution of this thinking on the part of social media leaders. We love instant public global messaging and conversation. It's what Twitter is, and it's why we're here. But we didn't fully predict or understand the real world negative consequences. We acknowledge that now, and we are determined to find holistic and fair solutions. And I'll come to some solutions. And in fact, I learned a lot from Shireen's presentation in terms of how this has evolved and what kinds of solutions are being devised up to this point. So next slide, please. So in trying to figure out how bad is the problem, and I think Professor Livingstone also talked about this as well. One of the biggest challenges for women in the political space, I'll just give you an example. In Congo, women who dare to enter politics, often they're called prostitutes. They're equated with prostitutes. Again, the sexualized kind of, or an attempt to sexualize women or reduce them, particularly women who aspire to powerful positions. This is a standard way to try and bring them down to size. So sexualized, so there are two problems that I will speak to: sexualized disinformation, or two approaches, often specific to women in politics, and also general disinformation used against everyone, but women, of course, are more vulnerable. In the political space, women are very much at the bottom of the totem pole. I'm sure it's the same in India, but very much the case in Africa. Next slide, please. So just a sort of a formal definition of sexualized disinformation. It mixes old ingrained sexist attitudes with the anonymity and reach of social media in an effort to destroy women's reputations and push them out of public life. What we saw from that 70%, 40% split was that it does have a chilling effect, and often women do respond by withdrawing and getting out of the space. And this is obviously, we want the opposite to be the case. Next slide, please. So I'm just bringing in two case studies. One from a context that is at the forefront of all of our consciousnesses right now, which is a case from Ukraine. A member of parliament, Svetlana Zalishkuk, was recently the victim of a fake tweet. Somebody hacked into her Twitter account and sent out a tweet basically saying, if the Russians take over, I'm going to run naked in the street. And so once again, taking a woman who was very outspoken, doing some very admirable things right now in order to save her country. There were attempts to reduce her to this sexualized being and to degrade her power and to take her power away from her. And the next case is someone I know personally, Soraya Aziz from Congo. Now, this is a case that not many people know because it comes from Africa. But this was, you heard the term earlier, revenge porn. She was the victim of revenge porn, where she was critical of a minister of state who did something patently wrong. And so she was absolutely within her rights as a civil society activist to criticize this person. But there was an orchestrated attempt to create an image of her that was very negative, and that was in the form of revenge porn. Next slide, please. And then there's the general disinformation approach is used as a political weapon. Virtual attacks on women come at a time right now when disinformation is increasingly being used by political leaders as a calculated strategy to shape public narratives and manipulate voters. Women, therefore, become soft targets in the information wars. Obviously, we know very much fake news came into being when Donald Trump was president of the United States. And he often used this sort of disinformation strategy to undermine his political opponents. When those political opponents are women, they become soft targets, given that we are pretty much at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to operating within the political space. Next slide, please. So another personal friend is the former president of Malawi, Joyce Banda. And I know her, because I know her well, I know her story very well. She's someone who served as president of Malawi between 2012 and 2014. And just, she took over from a very corrupt administration. And it was riddled with graft and scandal. Particularly, there was a lot of theft to the tune of billions of dollars, in fact. And that became known as Cashgate. But when she arrived, she actually was the first president in the history of the country to organize an external forensic audit in the wake of this corruption. And she also orchestrated the arrest of about 70 public servants. But amazingly, her successor to the presidency managed to successfully manipulate information to the point where she became associated with Cashgate. And if you go online even now and you look up, you Google Cashgate, you will find her name associated with that. And so her reputation as someone who fought to end corruption in Malawi became tarnished and twisted to the point where she ended up getting into exile. I first met Joyce while she was in exile in the United States. She was living in a very modest place, despite the fact that in Malawi, there were reports of her living in lavish mansions in the United States. And so it was clear that this information was false. So coming to the solutions, what are some of the solutions? Social media. Obviously, we've already heard from Shireen about what some people are trying to do to combat that. So I'll skip that. And just going back to the example of Soraya, this kind of happened organically because back then, people like Soraya, people who were victims of revenge porn, didn't have the kinds of tools that Shireen mentioned earlier. But what did happen is just sort of organically, a whole kind of groundswell of support for her just came out of nowhere. And this kind of served to neutralize those who were operating against her. And so, so this is what I would suggest, is that a woman who comes into the political space actually anticipates this and develops a support base in anticipation. And I think just as a practical suggestion, it would be great if the Center for Research could begin to systematically put together case studies, because I imagine that in India, there are similar experiences, women who are operating in the political space. And it would be great if we could collaborate between African women and Indian women to look at case studies that can be used in training. And lastly, I'll finish here by just saying what we're trying to do with Joyce Banda is to develop counter-information infrastructure. For example, one of the problems in Africa is that there's just not the same kind of infrastructure that someone like Hillary Clinton had at her disposal. She's another victim of attempts to be discredited, but she's got 9 books published where she's able to tell her story. Someone like Joyce Banda, out of the 5 women who have become president in Africa, there's only 1 book. And so we need to come up with ways to build counter information infrastructure around women like Joyce Banda. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you touched a nerve when you talk about sexualization of women in politics, global issue, and maybe the scale is different, but we all face that, and we all are aware of that. Thank you so much, Eve. And definitely collaboration between countries, I think, should be part of the solution, which is why we are here today. And now, Anne, lovely to get to talk to you yet again. We always greatly appreciate your support. And from your decades of experience in the digital safety sphere, we believe you would like to highlight your responses to youth online risk. and the spectrum from control to agency. I won't take more time. I'm just going to give you the floor now. And you need to unmute yourself. You're unable to do that. Yeah, now you can. Yeah.
They're lovely. Oh, thank you so much for including me. It's just an honor to be with these amazing fellow women. I thought it was so interesting to hear Sonia and Eve in their respective spheres talk about girls and women finding safety in numbers, in community. And so that might be something for us to think about going forward. I think we do think about it a lot, right? But maybe in a very sort of explicit, a foregrounding kind of way. So again, thank you for including me. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about children, which, like Sonia, I have been my major focus for more than 20 years, as I've been really a participant, observer, and chronicler in the child online safety space, really a synthesist rather than a researcher or activist. But so I feed off of the beautiful work of people like Dr. Livingstone and Eve, and thank you both so much for your presentations. So I'm going to talk about an aspect of child online safety we don't hear about much in this small field that Sonia referred to as, this internet safety and digital parenting field. Children were the first class we all focused on, the first protected class or vulnerable group in the entire public discourse on both sides of the Atlantic, where this field kind of got started around the year 2000. I started following it back in 97 after our Supreme Court struck down the Communications Decency Act and only left Section 230, which people, sort of refer to as kind of the seedbed of social media. So what I'd like to just talk about is agency, voice, and participation. And I'd like to suggest that we consider this, that there's a whole lot more to child online safety than parental control and surveillance or monitoring, rules and laws and platform content moderation, all of which has been almost the sole focus of child online safety, and really safety for all vulnerable groups online for well into our third decade now. These are external safeguards, right? And I realized back in 2010, right around then, and I wrote about it, I think in 2013, about how, we're really kind of teaching children that control and surveillance is the way we keep people safe, right? If we rely on them, we're suggesting that we're sort of locking in a kind of imbalance, all external, no internal. And the internal safeguards that have been developing over time, but in the case of media literacy for decades, have not been put forward enough as a way of, sort of the primary focus of safety for people their entire lives. So media literacy, social literacy, digital literacy, these are different things, and they all need, it's kind of like a three-legged stool of literacy in the 21st century in the digital age. Resilience, developing their inner guidance system, including ethics, and self-knowledge and their knowledge of their rights. I was thrilled that Sonia talked about that, because we need to, their rights are a source of safety, I believe. So there's also a hybrid of the two, external and internal. What starts out external and becomes internal as it's internalized by a child. Justin Patchen at the Cyberbullying Research Center wrote about it recently. He called it compassionate, authoritative parenting. And it's a blend of warmth, structure, and what Dr. Patchen's co-director Samir Hinduja calls autonomy support, supporting the child's agency or autonomy. When we do this, we help bolster their resilience. Dr. John-Hsien Liu wrote about self-control, which she described as our belief in our power to affect our destinies. We so want that for our children, right? That kind of control, Dr. Liu said in a talk, is one of 3 psychological experiences we can cultivate to bolster resilience, one of those internal safeguards, a sense of purpose, a sense of connection, and a sense of control. So I started thinking about this back in 2010 when I heard a phenomenal interview with author and practitioner Rosalind Weissman in the United States, when the 2nd edition of her best-selling book, Queen Bees and Wannabes, about teens and bullying came out. Weissman, who runs an organization called Cultures of Dignity, has been working with schools and parents all over the US on bullying, cyberbullying, and other behavioral issues that keep children from being and feeling safe in many, many cases. And what she said was, she said to parents, find out what is going on in the situation. Don't take control of the situation. It's the child's own dignity and sense of control over that social situation that needs to be restored. And so we need to work with our children on restoring their sense of dignity and control. You, the parent, she said, taking over robs them of the control they need to have in order to be able to face the bully. So she was talking about agency, dignity, and self-control. So I know there's not a lot of time, but just a few more words about some important research that has taken place in the last decade, including Professor Livingstone and Amanda Third in Australia, who she referred to, Nathan Fisk in the US, Rosemary Ricciardelli and Michael Adorjan in Canada, have published research on how a control paradigm has grown up around youth online safety, rather than a culture of dignity, agency, voice, and their rights of participation, where they are stakeholders in their own safety and that of their peers and communities. And Professors Patchen and Hinduja have just published the study on compassionate authoritative parenting, which really offers some new ideas. That they're kind of new old ideas, because Livingstone and Alicia Blum-Ross, her co-author of Parenting for a Digital Future, talk about how parenting is really changing. And very often it's a negotiation, and we need to mentor our children and get involved in their media use as much as possible, rather than set rules and just take control. So I can probably stop there. I just want to briefly add that what I've learned from scholars like Third and Livingstone and others about children's rights is that in focusing on control, in our fear and our desire to protect children, we have really overemphasized or found, sort of developed a kind of imbalance in their rights of participation and provision and protection, to the detriment of the participation side of things. And so if we can bring that balance back, we can help prepare our children for adulthood. We can help them learn about their rights, which is really needed in the United States, which is the only country on the planet that hasn't ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And we can really honor what the new sociology of childhood says, that children are human beings, not human becomings. And they have their own spheres of influence and their interests and causes and communities. And if we honor that and understand that better and listen more, I think we can provide them a really solid basis for protecting their own safety, that of their peers and their communities, as well as seeking the protection that they need from adults and platforms as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And a lot of what you said also, you know, it echoes with our efforts and beliefs here at CSR. We do believe in, you know, providing that autonomy or empowering the child itself in taking charge of safety and their own agency, especially online. And thank you for sharing such wonderful names with us. We're definitely going to research most of them. And yeah, thanks. So there is, as we had communicated earlier, there is a question answer section, though very, very short now. I'm being bombarded with these wonderful questions that are coming up. I will just take a few of them because I think we are very short on time. And after we are done with the few questions, I would just request panelists to give us a key takeaway, you know, just a very brief sort of a takeaway as a conclusion of their entire inputs given. And we have Dr. Ranjana ma'am here, and then I would ask Dr. Ranjana to please conclude this session. So I would like to start with, you know, the question for Professor Sonia. Yeah, it's from a parent in Tamil Nadu. You're being asked that parents are always in the driver's seat to ensure safety of their children's play online. But how do we make sure that this burden is shared by platforms as well? Is Professor Livingstone here? Because we can, if she, yeah, she did mention that she has to leave. So I'm going to, we're going to email this question to her, but as I can see, Shireen is here. Hi, Shireen. So I have a question for you. And, you know, from one of our student ambassadors from Punjab University, Harshit Sharma, he asks, how can big platforms like yours make a positive example for the rest to ensure digital safety for women and children, since thousands of new apps are being created daily?
As I said, like the technology that we develop, both, I spoke a lot about the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, but of course, transsexual exploitation is something that we have been working on for years. And the technology that we have developed is open source. So any technology company can use that same technology to keep kind of transsexual exploitation imagery off their platforms. And also probably, you know, think themselves about safety of their users. And I think as the speaker just before me, I think Collier was saying very, very eloquently and well, that I think one of the things is also to get young people and children, you know, taking that kind of agency themselves, participating, taking that responsibility, and for there to be a sort of shared kind of interaction between parents and young people so that they understand their online experience more.
Thanks, Shireen. And Dr. Ranjana, coming to you, there are so many questions coming from you, from mostly from media houses. And since time is of the essence, I would just like to say that since you are the strongest, one of the strongest pillars of the women's movement, your perspective on the importance of safe and inclusive spaces will greatly serve this discussion. And Amit from Jammu wants to know, how can CSOs like ours ensure a collaboration between global platforms and government agencies for digital safety? Ma'am. Ma'am, yeah, ma'am, you have to unmute. Sorry.
I haven't said anything so far. So I think we can direct the question to one of the panelists, and then let me just come at the whole thing. So
okay.
let
yeah.
Anne or Eve answered that question. Yeah.
But there is another very interesting question for Anne. I think I'm going to
read that out.
Yeah. So Shruti Shreya from the Dialogue, an organization in India, it's a think tank. What are some of the international best practices that India can learn from to ensure a more inclusive and rights enabling online space?
Is that for me?
Yes, Anne.
Well,
yeah.
I think the name of my organization, it kind of gives it away. I'm a huge believer in cross-industry collaboration, the kind that Shireen was talking about. I think that is an absolute pillar in making things safer, not just large platforms like Meta sharing technology, but platforms joining coalitions to share solutions as well. Then there's the very, very important area of NGO collaboration, which I think we're seeing right here today. You know, we need to combine forces and share intelligence and benefit, you know, rather than reinventing the wheel, right? CSR is brilliant at that because you collaborate across all kinds of continents and countries.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Anne. And very quickly, Eve, I'm getting questions for you as well. There is Gayatri from WPC, New Delhi. Eve, she wants to know, how would safe digital spaces ensure political advancement of women?
Oh, I think that's an easy one because the more safe the spaces are, the more women will enter them. And so we just have to work together. I mean, just what Anne said right now, what we're doing right now, the more we come together and share information so that women know that they've got, you know, people have their back in terms of providing support and ways to anticipate some of the abuse that they may suffer, and to appreciate that they're not alone. The more they know that there's some esprit de corps and there's some support for them, the more they'll feel emboldened to enter the space, and that's exactly what we need. And that's what and Ranjana knows that I'm very much an advocate of women coming together across borders. We collaborated on a project where we attempted to create such a thing. And so the more we can do that, and that's what I love about Zoom technology, you know, which we didn't even have 2 years ago, this really makes it a lot easier. And so the more we can do that, the more people will feel comfortable to enter the space.
Definitely. Very, very articulately put. Thanks, Eve. And, you know, I would just like to say that our panel with such distinguished speakers, it's enabled us to widen our perspective in our approach to this cause. I personally am extremely inspired. And to just end this discussion, I would request each speaker to impart just one key message to sum up their entire input for today. And we can probably start with you, Eve, since you were already speaking.
I think it's just to reiterate what I just said. There needs to be more collaboration. I think you've really gotten the ball rolling in this regard. CSR, Ranjana, you're to be commended for all the good work that your organization is doing in terms of just reaching out across the Indian Ocean. And it's really been great. And so I hope that we can try and collaborate on some of the things that I talked about in terms of looking at political women in particular, because that's my interest, looking at what their experience is and surfacing some of the best case studies that we can share with others so that others can actually know, again, that they're not alone and that they can actually feel comfortable. And this can be part of the training that women can enjoy in terms of women who want to get into the political space, how to use social media, how to use it effectively, and also how to avoid some of the pitfalls of social media.
Thanks, Eve. Anne, coming to you.
Yeah, I would just say that I feel that human rights is the framework for safety for all vulnerable users in digital spaces, human rights including children's rights, and that human rights activists need to acknowledge the importance of children's rights across the board. The framework is rights of participation, provision, and protection. And this, the very bedrock of human rights is dignity. So if we can acknowledge that worldwide and not be dependent on political systems and cultures and, points of division, but rather rights as a point of unity going forward.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you so much for that. And Ranjana ma'am, coming back to you. I would like to request you to conclude with key takeaways from today's roundtable with your message, please. Ma'am, your mic.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you for conducting it well. And also that what we heard from different speakers, from Professor Livingstone to Eve Thompson and Collier and also Shireen, is the different aspects of the same issue. That is how we are looking at child safety, we're looking at women, we're looking at girls. And what is important at the moment, I feel, is that we have to really, with the environment where on coding, someday I just heard so many new apps every day, so many new experiences, that in so many games for children, adults. I mean, every day you get to encounter this exploding online platforms. On the other side, the story of harassment is also growing. Every new research is coming up with a lot more people reporting harassment. We started with 41%. Now there are researchers, they're talking about 56% women who have experienced online some or the other form of harassment. So I think it's really growing. So I want to fix the responsibility on the social media companies to build a responsible community. It is as much as important to connect, to have the communities interacting with each other, but also it's much more important to instill responsibility among the communities that they're trying to build. So the first responsibility is on the companies themselves. And also, of course, then I always feel that there is need for more robust laws within the countries to protect and as Anne said, human rights. I mean, every citizen's rights needs to be protected within the constitutional and legal frameworks of those countries. And that is why I need more robust laws which are enforceable. Because we do have laws which are, still police is trying to figure out, cybercrime police is trying to figure out how to deal with all kinds of financial crimes to the personal harassment and bullying and all the other issues. So I think that's extremely important, for which I would think that now we are not just in the digital space, we have moved to virtual space. Now risk is much bigger, as the other day me and Anne were talking, and I think risk is much bigger because you don't know who's there, how the person will behave. Some other day some woman said that I was raped in the virtual sphere. I was shocked. I was really taken aback. How is that going to be dealt with? And if not that extreme, there are many other possibilities of cross-section. Maybe it is the all other gender, or women, men, children, adult and adolescent girls. I think it's very important to understand that this effort has to be much more AI based, and companies can move into the AI, streamlining their AI efforts to really start responding to such things. As much as virtual is growing, I would feel that AI should be their solution, and AI infrastructure has to become much more robust than what it is at the moment in identifying such harassments. Now, the other thing which is very important here, and I feel that safe online community issues have really not been as transparent from the communities, from the company side. And that is why you see so many issues which have come up in the recent past, that some researches were not really, shared, some information was not held back in the interest of the company's finances, financial growth, or many other things. So I feel that it's important to maintain a kind of transparency, not only from the side of the companies, but also from the side of the governments, because they are also equally responsible. So transparency becomes one of the major concerns, I feel, in future, and especially when we are moving from a big way from digital to virtual world. Now, I mentioned that, and I really want to reinforce it, collaboration and cooperation between across the industry. One single effort, which was to look at the complaints and the content moderation through the complaints, has been the oversight board, which was created by Facebook. Now, this is something where we need to really bring all the companies together for the to develop these strategies, robust and also to have robust content moderation strategies. I just was reading through for this discussion, and I saw a white paper from a platform which is a games platform. And that white paper especially focuses on women's safety on platform and teenage girls' safety on the platform. I think how many companies are really coming out with such documents? Let them come up with what all they have done, how they have responded to what is happening in terms of actual implementation, and so some kind of a collective collaborative effort, which is important, especially when they are engaging in pre-production consultations with safety people. I think we always raise that concern on our safety platforms, that why safety experts are not being consulted before you develop a product. If you're not doing that, then you're not realizing the end consequences of such a thing that will happen. It's extremely important that people should come together, and especially the platform should come together, companies should come together. And now it's not only social media platforms, there's so many gaming, so many, many e-commerce, dating websites. One of our very close friends have just joined a dating policy head for a dating platform. Now, I was wondering what kind of a role can you play on that kind, but there is much more important role to be played in those kind of situations. So I feel it's very, very important that we should look at it from a very holistic perspective and not just control children. I'm totally against any form of control, and because control in extreme form becomes abuse, and that goes against the child rights. Because if the child is not listening to you, you will use other ways of controlling the child, and that's absolutely unacceptable. So it's important to give children agency. It's important to empower them. And as Jyoti said, that through all our effort, this is what we are trying to do. Tell the schools, tell the parents, and hold parents responsible. That's the ultimate, I don't know whether Anne will agree or not, but I would think that hold parents responsible. If you have not experienced it, if you have not learned it, if you don't know anything about it, how can you really allow your child to be there? How can you really do the ultimate, democratic decision to give the child access to all kinds of online gaming, connecting, learning, whatever that you are giving access to. And this, especially pandemic period, a lot of children have really got access, and very open access. So I feel that parents will have to be really learning, be involved. Parenting has to be as much involved parenting as it is in the day-to-day things that you want to teach your children, not to talk to a stranger. I remember as a child, the first lesson was that you never speak to a stranger. So I think these are the kind of things, that messaging that happens as children have to happen from the parent side. Now, finally, I would just like to say what you all mentioned in your talk, just very, very briefly, that, how important that the points that you all have made becomes in terms of our today's conversation. As Professor Livingstone said, digital spaces offers both opportunities. Young people are experimental, we all know that, and risk-taking and explore boundaries. So that's why I'm saying controlling them will become after a point extremely, extremely important. And every effort at the moment is how to control them, how to monitor their time, how to, girls are more harshly judged. Who knows better than our work and our team people that how difficult it is when something goes wrong, they are really harshly judged. Adolescent girls are on their own, perhaps as people are harshly judgmental. In addition to that, mostly they walk out of it. I think one of our ad on Twitter for this program was that, we walk, people harass us, we take another route. We take another bus. We may go by, taxi, but what about online? They just walk out. They just close it. So that's something which is for politicians is true, women politicians. It's true for women politicians, a little more harder. No, isn't that true? That they are a little bit more harder in terms of thick skin to be able to go through all this. But what about women who are just joining into the political space? They just cannot take it, this kind of, and then journalists. We have had so many journalists who came to us, and I think, as you rightly said, 70% in the context of journalists that have faced. So it's important so that, this whole starting point of gender divide is the access. Obviously, we all know that. This is the point where all knowledge, opportunities, risks, and social support is required. Sometimes there is a trans-sectional dimension related to digital access to women, which are subtle, and thus girls lose out in the digital world. Girls face multiple disadvantages, and this has also become a space for disadvantage. It is evident that there is a huge gender divide in South Asia. And as Eve was suggesting, I think South Asia and Africa, I would say there's a huge digital divide. Meta has taken a 5-pronged approach, as Shirin was presenting, to create digital safety to give people more control over their social interactions. It is commendable that Meta believes in zero tolerance towards child sexual exploitation. A lot of work, because we have been there together, myself and Anne, and we've seen how the really effort has progressed over the years. Need to be done more. No, it's not. We've not reached the space from where we can say, oh, we have done enough. As he mentioned, the challenges faced by women in politics and political space take forms of revenge porn and also, it's nothing new. We all have been called prostitute at some point or the other online. You don't know how much abuse that some of us have faced during the years, but I feel that we need to do much, much more to do. And finally, I would say that CSR's initiatives and your support for the work that we are doing over the years is really going a long way, not only working on just sensitizing the community and children, but also law enforcement agencies and lawmakers. We are trying to approach, our advocacy is going on, and we should be able to create better legal framework, more awareness amongst the children and parents, and also, of course, much more collaboration, cooperation among the civil society organization to respond to harassment and online digital divide challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for concluding this and making my job so much easier, because you said everything I wanted to say and more, and 100 times better. In the interest of time, we are absolutely at the end, and I would just like to thank everyone quickly. And this has been truly enlightening. Please make sure you watch out our social media handles, because for the next few days, we will share key moments from today's sessions. My teammate Shruti has shared our handles here, so please make sure you keep checking those out. And also, we hope to hold a lot more discussions like these in the future, and we will keep approaching you for your support. Thanks, Eve, and I'm going to thank Shireen and Sonia also. They had to leave. They were really out of time. Just thank you, everyone. Thanks, and my team also.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And success to CSW66. I hope next time we'll meet in person.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Hoping.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.